Right after the Horus Heresy ended, after the greatest civil war that the universe had ever seen, after brother turned on brother, sons against their father, right after the traitor war master Horus Lupercal fell, humanity didn't get peace. They had a grudge match, a galaxy-wide revenge tour, and that is what is the Great Scouring, or also known as the Scouring. It was the Imperium's brutal counterattack that reshaped the galaxy as we know it today in the 41st millennium. And with Games Workshop announcing the Ashes of the Imperium book series coming out, people are hungry for this era again. It's a place that we've not really explored so far in depth, in lore, and in Black Library publications. So let's break it down accurate, fast, and with just enough personality that the Inquisition can't arrest me for heresy. I'm not a zombie. I'm a man of the people. I'm all for the Emperor. So the Great Scouring, or the Scouring, happens immediately after Horus dies on the ship, the Vengeful Spirit. This was his flagship. The Traitor Legions flee Terra and the spaces around it, and all the assignments they had running interference or blockading different forces to get away from the Imperium forces that had been backed up against the wall, was on their heels, and then started getting some momentum and started fighting back. It was the biggest old crap moment in Warhammer history. The leader, the big dog, the alpha, Horus, had died. The Emperor was still alive, and there were still forces from both sides of the galaxy, the Dark Angels on one side and the Ultramarines on the other, coming for backup. The Loyalists, they were battered, they were half dead, they were barely standing, and they didn't even bother to celebrate. They turned their ships around and they chased the bad guys. And this was not a cleanup, this was scorched earth. This was a cleansing. The Imperium began purging traitor remnants. They started going after chaos cults. They started I'm sure they probably did exterminate us, but they started razing corrupted worlds to the ground. Basically anything that looked or smelled or acted like heresy got put to the stake. Some real Puritan stuff. And let's be honest, like, after everything that Horus pulled off, everybody was on hair trigger. If the local farmer sneezed wrong, somebody screamed heresy, somebody screamed chaos corruption, and they got burnt. So the Loyalist Legions, they launched counter invasions all across the galaxy. Ultramarines got involved, Blood Angels got involved, the Imperial Fists, my favorite faction, and the chapter that took the biggest hits. They were there in the trenches holding off a huge amalgamation of chaos forces. They took the heaviest of the blows. They're right there looking for that revenge too. The Dark Angels got in there. All the big boys go to work. In every Traitor Legion world that they could identify correctly or incorrectly, didn't matter, it got marked for death. Every fortress that the traitors built, flattened. Every leftover rebellion that hadn't been culled, or cult that was walking around worshiping what they shouldn't have been worshiping, they got purged right off the map. This is when the Traitor Legions get forced into the Eye of Terror, a tear in the Materium that accesses into the Immaterium, the flip side of our reality, a different dimension. And it's not because that the Chaos and Traitor forces wanted to go there. Some did, a lot didn't. It's because if they stayed in Imperial space, they were going to get the biggest butt-whooping spanking of a generation, of a lifetime, of a millennia. For every times if they ever ran into another Space Marine, there was no chill left. And it wasn't all because they wanted to go there. Some did. Some really liked that twisted reality and easily access to demon nonsense. Some didn't really care for chaos in particular. The Iron Warriors come to mind. The Night Lords, they're just crazy without needing crazy. They mostly went there to get out of Imperial space, because if they were going to stay in Imperial space, they were going to be turned into Space Marine chili. During the heresy, the traitors, had momentum. They had surprise. They went turncoat. They Order 66'd it from, that sounded crazy, 66'd it. They Order 66'd it from Star Wars. It was a huge surprise, and they literally got blessed, juiced up by the Chaos Gods. But in the Scouring, their advantage collapsed. Horus died. These blessings, these manifestations of chaos and demonic power started to fade and seemed to just leave. They no longer felt the connections to their outside influences. Their fleets started to get scattered. They had expelled a lot of resources during this invasion. Their supply lines were ruined, and the Loyalists were pissed. You ever fought a guy that's bleeding and tired and emotionally destroyed and on their last legs? That's when the dog comes out. That's where that phrase, never back a dog into the corner, they'll start biting. That's what the Imperium did, and that's when they're at their scariest. That is what the Imperium was like during the Scouring. They were a hammer, and everything was a nail. By the time the Loyalists hit full stride, the traitors were in survival mode. They retreated system by system until they finally could find shelter in the Eye of Terror. And the moment that they do, boom, the warp storm slams shut behind them, sealing the nightmare off for millennia. But that's just the military side of things. The Scouring was more than military actions. There was a huge political fallout within the Empire. They needed to rebuild, they needed to reorganize, they needed to redefine themselves. So what came out of the Scouring? Well, one of these things we mentioned in the beginning of the video, the second founding. Space Marine legions were broken into smaller successor chapters. The Inquisition's seeds were planted at the end of the heresy, grew, found root, and formed during the Scouring. The Inquisition being the Empire's secret police, the Federales. You got your street cops, and you got your all-encompassing agents of the Empire. And the Ecclesiarchy rises, the imperial cult that grows in power, who worships the emperor as a god, even though the emperor said a lot while he was alive, although he's still alive now, just a shell of himself. They worship him and his psychic manifestations and the influence that he has upon the empire, and it starts to grow. They use it as a source of inspiration and influence to spread across the galaxy, to give people hope. And then the reconstruction begins. Thousands of worlds start rebuilding after the heresy. So yes, the Great Scouring is literally the birth of the modern Imperium as we know it. The structure, the politics, and the religious madness that we recognize today, that was planted and created during this period. But here's the twist that people forget, especially those of us who are mankind apologists. During the Scouring, the Loyalists, they just weren't saints. They were not saints. Some chapters committed massacres. Some took revenge a little too far. Some wiped out planets because its population hesitated to help them. This era was incredibly dark. It was very, very dark. And in the book, The Ashes of the Imperium, probably going to lean into the gritty post-Civil War vibe that's available. I'm super excited about this. Games Workshop has chose to highlight the Scouring again, and that's a really big deal. We had tons and tons of Horus Heresy books, but the time period between the Horus Heresy and what we have now, the Scouring, it's not been touched a whole lot. We have a little bit of information, not a series like this to pull from. This is the era where the new Imperium is forged. Traitors became the Chaos Legions that we know now, and fan favorite heroes really started to build their legends here. Ashes of the Imperium is the first book in this new series that finally dives into the era. We'll get the politics, we'll get the revenge, we'll get the rebuilding, we'll get the grudges, we'll get all of it. So that is the Great Scouring in a nutshell. That's the Imperium's bitter, bloody payback tour that shaped the galaxy for the next 10,000 years. It was brutal. It was fascinating, especially with all the Game of Thrones style turning of politics and negotiations and manipulations and movement. It's really cool. And it's about to get a whole new spotlight. So tell me down in the comments, Which Legion Scouring story are you excited to see, or which one should I cover next? I want to see the dynamic between a broken Rogel Dorn, who is so hard on himself for not being there when the Emperor, he didn't die, but he might as well be dead, and his contempt that he has for Rabute Gilliman, who kind of comes in after him and his sons, the Imperial Fist. Ooh, I said that weird. The Imperial Fist were there holding the line. Every man, every drop of blood, they were there. And then the Ultramarines come in and they pull an FBI and we're in charge here now. And I want to see that friction between Gilliman and Dorn. I think that'd be a really compelling and complex story to cover. I want to see the Dark Angel's point of view, the Ultramarines' point of view. I want to see the Sons of Horus melt down. You know, Horus had an entire legion at the time. Sons of Horus. Well, their dad's dead now, and their leader is dead now. I want to see how that implodes and then develops into the Black Legion. I got breakdowns of all this stuff coming soon. Subscribe, drop a like, and stay tuned. I have got you covered for all things the Scouring leading up to the book release. Go forth in the world and do good. The world needs heroes. Stay sharp. I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye, everybody.